what happens with
Yes. Hey, welcome everybody. Hopefully you guys are joining us. We'll wait a few minutes. Lieutenant Mark Cancia is checking out what angle he wants to go at, which is good side.
Just trying to present the best for the people.
So we welcome everybody who is joining us live. We'll give you a few more minutes to add a few more views. Tell all your friends, share it, tweet it, gram it, TikTok it. Can't really TikTok it, but so we'll be here on Facebook. Just have a discussion. We ask that you join with us in the comment sections as we continue to go. Dakari, look at there. They let Dakari out. That's good. I saw this post today. It talked about dad jokes or dad sayings. It's like when you see your friend somewhere, oh, they let you in this place. A dad
Every
joke.
time. Yeah.
Yeah.
Every time.
Yep. So let's go ahead and get started.
You're not allowed to be here.
We'll go ahead and get started. Thanks everybody for joining us. I'm here with Lieutenant Mark Cancia out in Jackson, Tennessee, and Lieutenant Judy Chung in Louisville South Corps. That's my home corps where I soldier at. And Mr. Joel Rogers down there in Cleveland, Tennessee, at Inman Coffee and the Cleveland Corps. So we're just wanted to get on and discuss Salvation Army ministry. I know it's Candidate Sunday, so I know Joel was a little scared at first when I said, "Hey, I'm doing something on Candidate Sunday." But like I said, this day we want to focus on leadership within the Salvation Army ministry, and that includes officership, of course, but it also knows that God is calling those into ministry outside of officership and as employees, as ministry positions within the Army. Even as admin positions, I see that as a ministry, somebody in finance or somebody in development. They have a strong skill set that God is calling them to assist in the Salvation Army ministry where they're at. So we're going to go around and just tell everybody who we got. And I want to do ladies first with Lieutenant Judy Chung. Just tell us where you're at, where you are, and all that good stuff.
All right. Well, like Jay said, Captain Jay, I am here. We are here in Louisville South, in beautiful Louisville, Kentucky, enjoying where God has us right now. So it's been great so far.
And your corps officers there, correct?
We are the corps officers, yes, at Louisville South. Yeah.
Best corps in Kentucky, I'll say that. So Mark doesn't get mad.
He said Kentucky, Mark.
Right.
Yes, sir. And we'll go down to Mark Cancia. Introduce yourself, please, where you're at.
Hey, y'all, what's up? It's me, Mark Cancia. I think everybody knows that I am a child of God that just likes to have a good time. I'm currently serving as the corps officer here in Jackson, Tennessee, where I've been for about 8 months now. And so I lead the ministry and administrative work here for the Salvation Army.
Excellent. Jackson's a great place. It's nestled between Memphis and Nashville, but it holds its own, correct, Mark?
That's right.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And if you want to go visit Mark, he's up for a visit. He's always having people, so he loves having you. So go out there and visit Mark Cancia. So thank you, Mark. And he's corps officer there in Jackson. And now Joel Rogers, who I've met at a TYI, and then now I'm here in his division with him. And so I've gone down and had a meal with him and a group there and things like that. So go ahead, Joel.
Heck yeah. So I am not an officer, but I have been serving in the Cleveland Corps here in Tennessee before it was a corps, and we got to watch it become a corps. And I've been here for a little over 10 years. So we lead a ministry here called Inman Coffee, and lead a lot of other programs and ministries of the Salvation Army here as well. But I'm the director of Christian education for whatever that means, and end up doing, you know how Salvation Army is, you do a lot of different things. But yeah, that's me down here in Cleveland.
Nice. And that's definitely a unique ministry, and I'll let Joel talk about that in a little bit, how that all got started and how he was called to doing things like that. As it is Candidate Sunday, I did want to talk to you a little bit about each other's calling and how there was a calling on your heart. Speaking to those out there maybe listening or listening later, how do they know they're called? How did you find out? How did you answer that calling, and what that looked like to you? So we'll start with Mark. Since I think he is the youngest. Is that correct? And just tell us about your calling and, well, first, how you got connected to the Salvation Army, and then your calling into ministry and ultimately officership, and if you could connect with that. So.
Okay, so I first encountered the Salvation Army as a kid. My family and I, both my parents and all of my siblings, we all left the Haitian Baptist Church that we were part of, and we transferred our membership to the Salvation Army when I was about 9 years old. And so to go from Haitian Baptist Church to the Salvation Army here in America, it was quite different, right? So in the Haitian Baptist Church, services were commonly, 2 and 3 hours long, and they were, pretty awesome. Yeah, as a kid, I didn't really appreciate it the way that, the adults did.
Yeah, kids are like, let's go, let's wrap this up.
Right. But the adults, they were just entrenched in the spirit, just enjoying that time of worship. But anyway, so needless to say, went from the Haitian Baptist Church to the Salvation Army, where services were a little shorter. A lot of times they include meals afterwards. And so as a kid, I was like, yes, let's do this church. And so,
sign me up.
Right. And so at that point, I was attracted to the ministry of the Salvation Army, and it really just kind of revitalized my relationship with the Lord, because the worship experience, the messages, and then the opportunities for connection either at summer camp or throughout the week, they were all super relevant, and easy to connect with. And so that was my first encounter with the Salvation Army. And then growing up, I realized how much more the Salvation Army did, including like summer camps over the summer, rehabilitation centers for guys and women who were addicted to drugs and alcohol, and then the social work. And as I was in high school and I had to choose a career to kind of explore, I thought of officership, just because I knew at that age that I wanted to do something that was exciting and not the same every day. And boy, did I learn early on in officership that no day is the same. There is some routine, you show up to the Corps every day. Yeah, there is lots of excitement, and every day there's something new. And so that's kind of like, I don't know, the long version.
Yeah. You definitely have some things that are consistent, but there's definitely the days aren't the same. Even if things are consistent, the consistency will change, and so it makes for an exciting time. So, and we'll go to Joel. Joel, how did you get connected? I know Mark kind of grew up in the Army as well as Judy, but Joel, you're a first generation Salvationist, as we like to call them. Is that correct?
Yep. Let me tell you, my first Salvation Army experience was really odd, but I'll get to that in a minute. I grew up Pentecostal in the Church of God, and grew up in the mountains in North Carolina. First felt called into ministry when I was about 15 years old, and accepted that call, but didn't know what that looked like. And just felt from times of prayer and from times of study that God was going to do something different. That I kept trying to steer it in the direction of, oh, I'm going to be a pastor in the traditional front of the church sense. And God kept saying, it's something different. It's something different. And I just didn't know how that was all going to come together. I went to college here in Cleveland, and this is about 2.5 hours from my home where I grew up. And came to college, got my degree in ministry, was tracking towards whatever this big unknown was, and then just accidentally fell into Salvation Army in the coolest God way possible. Yeah. I was working at Verizon after graduating college, just trying to make ends meet. I had a phone thrown at me, and I said, "I'm done. I don't want this." And so I was looking up at the time, I'm just, fresh out of college, looking up any job that'll pay. And I said, I want something that at least doing good and we'll work towards ministry goals. But I looked up some jobs. Salvation Army was hiring, and long story short, I did not get that job. And the person called me and said, "I've got good news and bad news." And I said, "Bad news first." She said, you didn't get the job. We think that it would be a totally wrong fit for you. But the good news is we want you to meet somebody, and introduced me to Sergeant Ruthie Forgy, who was just launching the Corps here in Cleveland, and almost didn't go because, they just told me I didn't get the job. Right. So like every part of my fresh graduated from college self was like, nah, I ain't going to go. And then Jesus, straight up, my wife and I prayed about it, and she's got wisdom far beyond what I do. And she looked at me and said, "No, we need to go." And we went and met with Ruthie, and we left her office a few hours later and just felt connected. And there was no job yet. It was just exciting groundwork of starting ministry and foundational stuff. And I got to share with her, like, hey, I've got this weird calling for youth and young adults, but in a non-traditional setting, and I've never known where that fits. And then she was just like, "Let me tell you where it can fit." Yeah. And so, we launched. It was a blast. So then my very first Salvation Army experience, my first church experience, was a soldiers rally.
Nice.
And let me tell you, I went from zero Salvation Army experience to soldiers rally on one. Had a lot of questions.
That's a Salvation Army baptism right there.
Man,
they dunked you right in and held you under a little bit, didn't they?
Straight in. But when they broke out the flags, I was like, "What is this?" But
you thought the Pentecostals got crazy. No.
Yeah, I did.
You didn't do nothing yet.
But that's how I got connected, and how I accepted calling and stumbled into where it belongs. So
great. I'm glad you did. Yes. All right, Miss Judy. I know you were born and raised like the three rest of us were dragged along into the Corps. So tell us your story.
Yeah. I like to say that I bleed red, yellow, blue, right?
Okay.
Born and raised. Well, I am an Army brat, third generation Salvationist. My parents are retired officers, and my family's originally from the Caribbean territory. My parents trained in Jamaica and had appointments all throughout the Caribbean territory. My brother and I were both born in Haiti. We grew up in Jamaica, and then we moved to the Eastern Territory. So I'm an Eastern Territory transplant to the South. So we've been able to see the Army through countries and different territories. So, and I think God has born in me just this love for the Salvation Army, to be able to see different parts of it and different aspects of it. and just, and now have the opportunity for my children to do that as well. Never had any plans on becoming the Salvation Army officer, didn't want any parts of it, as probably a lot of would say the same, because they see what their parents go through. I mean, as a kid, I see my parents wearing the uniform every day. I'm like, I'm not doing that. That's no fun. Why do I have to do that? Now it's the beauty of my life because I know exactly what I'm wearing. So it's not, I don't have to think about it. But yeah, I've experienced so much good through the Army, and been able to travel so much, and meet so many different people around the world. God bless you, Mark.
Thank you.
And I like to say also that the Army world is so small, because like I said, we've seen in different parts of the world, and then we come here to the South, or where I grew up in the Eastern Territory in New York, and you see people that you've known from afar off. Like Mark's parents are connected to my parents, and it's just the most beautiful, beautiful thing that the Army world shares. That we have this rich, beautiful history that we all share together, and we have different experiences that we can bring together and continue the ministry on. So I'm excited about tonight, and being able to share what the Army means to me personally, and also to see how God is going to use this summit to speak to others. So thank you, Captain Jay, for inviting us today.
Yeah,
so
I mean,
I'm excited.
You're talking about a big army, but it's also a small army. My brother, I came when you moved and I moved to Louisville. My brother actually worked for Judy's parents in Boston.
My parents
at the Kroc Center.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. And my grandparents were stationed in the Caribbean for a while. So not sure if they connected down there, but Caribbean's where it's at, I guess.
That's right.
So yeah. And I've known Mark growing up in Florida. We grew up in Florida together. Grew up with his sister. I think very highly of his parents. His parents were officers for a while down in South Florida for a long time. And I knew whatever corps they had, they were bringing people to youth councils. They were excited. They were always well into ministry. Even when your dad retired, I saw him right before he retired. I said, please come and retire at my corps. But I'm sure he was getting more offers from where he went in Fort Myers. So, but it's a small world, but as an Army world, we cover a lot of ground. We're international. So just being in the joy of that. So, and we'll continue on. What's one testimony? Give me a testimony. We'll start with Judy since she's so excited. One testimony of the Army's ministry that affected you, seeing a story of somebody else, or one of the ministries that you got to be involved with or saw from an outside perspective. What is one of those?
Oh, that's a loaded question, Jay.
Yeah. And you had to pick just one. So
many.
That's why you have a lot.
Just one. Oh my. Before we even became officers, and this involves my kids. So, full disclosure, I've never enjoyed visiting nursing homes. Okay, that's not ever been a part of the thing that I'm jumping up and down to do. It's not something that will be first on my list. But when one of my sons was younger, he was able to go on a CCM Sunday, just to go, on Community Care Sunday, Community Care Ministry, and he went and visited a nursing home, and he didn't do too well. I guess he has his mama's heart. He went in and he saw these older people, and he just broke out in tears. He broke out in tears, and he just could not understand why these people were here. He could not understand why weren't they at home with their families? Why did they have to be cooped up in these, in this facility? He just couldn't get it. And my husband had to explain to him, sometimes when people get older, it's harder for their families to take care of, of their family members. And these are the options that we have so that we make sure that our family members are taken care of. And I think that experience breathed something new in me as well as in him, because what he said was, my grandparents are never going to be in a nursing home. And just because of that ministry, he was able to just go on a different level of what love looks like for him. And I was able to say, wow, God, thank you for allowing, not for that he broke down and lost it, but that you were able to show him through this visit the way that you want him to love and the way that you want him to show that love. And I think that's a personal thing for me, but it's huge, because a lot of times when we go to nursing home, it's something that we do out of rote, and it's, it's another Sunday, let's go visit these people and, give out these boxes and show and give them, because, maybe their families may not be able to visit them or whatever. But that was just saying to me, okay, we have to be able to love differently. We have to be intentional about what we're doing, so that they truly feel loved and accepted, and they truly feel that we're doing this because we love them. And it's not because we're doing it out of obligation, because it's just to check a box off for the month. So that was just like an eye opener for me, that whole experience.
It's always great to get our kids involved. So to allow them to see the ministry. My parents made sure I was involved, even in aspects that I couldn't directly be involved with. When my parents were stationed in Clearwater, my dad would pick me up from school, and then we'd go visit in the hospital. I was in high school, right? That's the last thing I want to do, getting out of a day of high school. All my friends are going to do other stuff, and they're like, all right, we got to go visit some people in the hospital. I'm like,
right.
But it taught me a lot of things. It taught me to appreciate and love people. But like community care, where your kid sees how to love and how to be loved, and maybe won't receive anything back. That's true love and true agape love, And so that was good for your kids to see and be involved with. So Joel, also, if you're watching and you want a question, put it in the comments. We'll try to answer your questions about ministry and calling, not about anything else. So, so Joel, do you have a testimony, a story you might want to share about some ministry you were involved with or saw from the aspect within the Army, of course?
Yeah. So youth councils, it was maybe my fourth youth councils since I'd come to the Army. I didn't know all the people yet. Now 10 years in, I've totally been adopted and grafted into this big, small army, right? Having connections and having people you can call literally anywhere in the world and know that they'll answer and know that they'll help and all of those things. But at the time I didn't have all that yet. And so we brought our kids from the Corps, and we had one young man who had never really experienced much at all. He'd grown up in our zip code here. He'd never left our county. He grew up in extreme poverty, and we walked into the hotel in Gatlinburg, and he saw the room. And beforehand, he'd actually asked me, what do I need to bring? He was trying to bring like towels, and I said, man, no, the hotel has all that. And he just he'd never been to a motel or a hotel to even know. And he walked in and he saw the view. And if you've been to the I forget what the name, the Park Vista in Gatlinburg, the view is gorgeous. You see just National Park for forever. And he choked up a little bit, and he said, you mean I can stay here? And I said, yeah, this is where you're staying for the weekend. And just like his experience that whole weekend everything was fresh. And so we get down to the service, and he's just having a hard time. He's having a hard time with the newness, with the crowds, with all of it. And I watched as he got up and he left the room. And so I go to follow him. And before I could even get back to him, there were 4 or 5, and I know them now to be to be brothers in the Lord, but at the time I didn't know them. 4 or 5 other officers who had seen him too and met him in the hallway and literally sat in the floor in the hallway outside of youth councils and just talked to him. And for me, like I was absolutely wrecked because I knew his story. I knew the inner workings, and to see like people who didn't know that still just meet him right where he was, and literally sitting in the floor in the middle of the hallway outside of the youth council service. They sat out there for the rest of service, and helped translate to him the very love that's being preached in the other room was being demonstrated out in the hallway. And it didn't have to be up at the altar, and it didn't have to be in a public showing, and he didn't have to respond up on stage. He could respond by going backwards into the hallway, and they met him there too. And that for me was my introduction into just the deep-seated love that Salvation Army carries for the people that we serve. And it blew me away then, and I still just love thinking about it now.
That's amazing.
I love that.
You love the stories, especially of youth councils, especially for kids that aren't used to getting to experience, events like that.
Yeah.
Hundreds of Christians coming together and worshiping and just having a time of refreshment. So, very good story. So, Mark, you ready?
I am. Wait, I say I am, but could you repeat the question?
Just a testimony of you seeing the Army in action, or you being involved with somebody's testimony or a story that you have from ministry within the Army, or something like that. And I'll give you a little bit of time. This was a testimony of mine. It's really a failure of mine that has taught me over the years and continues to teach me. I used to work in a ministry down in Florida at a community center. We had an after-school program, and we would have about 70 to 80 kids a day in the gym and come and play. And there's always that one kid, right? That one kid in every youth program. That one kid that continues to bother you. That's always at you, always asking you questions, always getting in trouble. The other kids, he didn't really get along with the other kids, but it wasn't because they didn't like him. He just would annoy them so much, and then they'd get tired of it, along with me, who was on staff, and I get annoyed with the kid. And so I stopped working there and moved on. And then one summer at camp, I was there visiting summer camp at Camp Keystone, and I see this kid playing in the music. It was a music camp, and he was playing his horn in the beginner band. And I see him in this concert, and I try not to make eye contact. I'm like, oh my gosh, no way. Like, I don't want to see this kid. No way. And sure enough, afterwards, he comes beelining to me. He goes, Jay, what's up? It's me. I'm like, dude, what's up, man? You doing all right? He goes, yeah. And so I would see him like every year after that at camp, even after I'd moved on. And then my first youth councils as an officer, I went to youth councils. And that annoying little kid that I was like, this kid's just annoying. I'll put up with him because that's my job. It was less of a ministry then. It was more of a, I got to pay some bills job. This kid was up on stage leading worship for all of youth councils. Wow. And right then, God just like tore me apart. And I get like emotional about it. But to see, teaching me that lesson of what the Army can do even without me. And I got to see God's plan and purpose for even the annoying kid at summer camp at the community center that always got on your nerves, that every kid was just like, you're getting on my nerves, go away. It's just loud and talkative. And now leading worship at youth councils and is a great young man for God. So that's kind of my mistake testimony, but I've learned from it, and I learned what the Army can do in spite of my flaws. So that's my story and testimony. I love, the Army's ministry, always allowing those, those kids that everybody says no to, they can become great leaders and do mighty things through the Salvation Army. So
Yeah.
that's my story. Mark, you had time to figure it out?
Well, here's the issue, Jay.
Yes, sir.
I keep going back and forth in my mind between two. So can I do two short ones?
Yeah, do two short ones. We'll put you on a timer.
Okay, cool. So the first one, and this is probably the testament. So y'all know I was really attracted to the Salvation Army's ministry because of the service length and just the clear message of the gospel that was presented in the services. But then I remember when I was probably like 14. So I was in the Army for like 5 years at that point. And living in South Florida, it was common to have hurricanes. And I want to say it was in the fall. It was probably in October. There was a hurricane that had hit South Florida. And I remember going to the Corps or to the ministry site where the Salvation Army operates. And we were making peanut butter and jelly sandwiches for lunch. And people were in the kitchen. They were starting to work on dinner. And it was just pretty intense, right? Because our entire area had been devastated by this category, maybe 4 hurricane. And I remember the entire city was under lockdown. I remember I said it was going to be short. So here we go. I'm going to speed it up.
No, you're good. You're good. We got plenty of time.
So we were at the Corps. We were making peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. And then my dad tells me that the divisional commander was coming down and was going to assist us in food distribution. And I was like, okay, that sounds cool. And Jay, you know him. It was at the time Major Hedgren. Major Hedgren came down.
Yes.
And this guy,
you know him.
Right. And so he comes down, and when he gets into the parking lot, he calls my dad and he's like, hey, Captain, I'm outside. And so we walk outside, and I'm following my dad like everywhere he goes because this is just exciting to me. And so we walk outside, and Major Hedgren steps out of this vehicle that's fully decorated with Salvation Army emergency disaster. Like, it has lights on top, and he steps out, and he's in full uniform. I'm talking cap and all. And I'm just like, who is this guy? And
nothing less.
You know what I'm saying? And like, he's standing so erect, and like, he's like, Captain, how's it going down here? And like, I'm just like, this guy is absolutely awesome, and I want to be like him. Like, he was like a superhero, like in real life. And so that at that moment, I was just like, man, like that uniform and the work that we do, and the fact that he came to be with us and to serve peanut butter and jelly sandwiches in the community was just really impressive to me, and I'll never forget it. But then the second testimony that I have within the Salvation Army's ministry happened at Camp Keystone down in Florida. This was several years later when I had went off to college, and I had made lots of bad choices, and I had even left church for a while because I just preferred not to go to church hungover. I remember I was at a point where I was like, I want to get back in Christian fellowship. I want to be part of the Christian community again. And so as summertime was rolling around, I was like, I remember being at camp and just the community that we had at camp. And so I went and I worked at Camp Keystone, and I was telling one of my co-counselors about the struggles that I was having and how I had stopped going to church and I was disconnected from Christian community and how I wanted to get reconnected. His name is Micah. I hope he's watching, because every time I tell my testimony, I always have to mention Micah, because Micah literally changed the trajectory of my life, where he taught me Ephesians 2 verses 8-9. For it is by grace you have been saved through faith, not by works, but it's a gift from God. And so I remember being at Camp Keystone, and I was just like, wait a minute. So all this time, like, I'm over here trying not to do things and trying to show up and trying to be good and trying and being exhausted. And you mean to tell me, Micah, that salvation is a free gift and all I have to do is accept it and experience it and just live, like in that grace? And he's like, yes. And so ever since that time at the Salvation Army's Camp Keystone, my relationship with God has just been different. And it's because of that conversation that happened at camp with my co-counselor, Micah, where he gave me the keys to the kingdom. Literally, learning Ephesians 2, verses 8-9 unlocked the gospel for me. And it really transformed my life and brought me into a relationship with God. And really just, it was super helpful.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That's great. Good. Let's go back to your calling. How did you know you were called? For me, I feel like I've always been called when I was young. Like looking back, I always knew I wanted to help somebody. I applied to be a police officer and wanted to do that for a while, get into law enforcement to help others. I always wanted to serve others. I always felt best when helping. I couldn't just pass people and think, we can't just pass these people. So for me, I think calling into the Salvation Army, it put kind of the foundation of my helping people is if I'm going to help somebody, there's got to be like, I'd rather help them for eternity instead of helping them for the day.
Yeah.
Or helping them for a month or helping during Christmas time. What if, it got deeper for me, and the way I was to fulfill that ministry for me, it was officership. It was doing this full-time ministry into officership. I really think there's no greater mission statement than the Salvation Army's mission statement of what I wanted to do with my life, and aligning that calling with what I wanted to do with the Salvation Army's mission statement of serving and loving others without discrimination, right? And telling them about Jesus Christ, not just loving them through that day, but loving them into eternity, into a relationship with Christ. And so that's how I felt a calling into Salvation Army officership, into ministry with the Salvation Army. So
do I get to respond first?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
We'll go with Mark.
So the way that the calling experience kind of happened for me, it started off young. It started off when I was young, where some of the things that I was inclined to doing and some of the gifts that I saw that I had aligned with what the Salvation Army does. So like, I really enjoy working with people. And so because I enjoy working with people, and with the Salvation Army being a social service provider and a church, and just this entire like Christian movement, what I naturally enjoy doing aligns with what we do as an organization. And so that calling was confirmed when several of the people that I really admire, including Major Julio Da Silva, Major Marion Platt, Major Zach Bell, just spoke things into my life that reassured that the way that I was created, some of the gifts and skills that I currently have are quite compatible with the work, the mission, and the ministry of the Salvation Army. And now what I will also say is, what I was called to when I was younger, so like when I was 15, I've realized now, 15 years later, that calling kind of evolves, right? And yeah. I'm being called again to ministry, and I'm being called again to this area, and I'm being called again to these people. And so like this calling is a continual experience. And so it works well when I'm well connected to God. listening to his voice and really just trying to be in a healthy connection with him.
Yeah. We connect, if there's someone out there listening that are trying to figure out this calling, or if they're even called, what type of ministry they're called into, lean on people that have answered their calling. Like Mark said, there's somebody that has guided him as his calling evolved, is to connect with those who know what that calling is like and have answered their call, whether it's your corps officer or somebody in ministry in your corps, or somebody that you just know is spiritually fed and spiritually led to guide and direct you. Joel?
Yeah, so for me, I feel like I need to separate the two things. So there's a sense of calling that we all should have, and I think William Booth even hits on this. He says, not heard the call, you say, not called, you say, not heard the call, I think you should say. I butchered it the first time, we got there second time through. And that, like, not heard the call, right? We all have a call. There's not a single person who comes into the kingdom of God that he doesn't then call to a work. Now, how that gets expressed is incredibly diverse, and sometimes that expression is just a calling to serve in whatever capacity you're already plugged in your current career, in your current outlets. But we all have a call. And so for me, it's kind of differentiating that. And then also inside of my calling to full-time ministry, which I think is a different thing. I was called to full-time ministry before I ever knew Salvation Army. So it wasn't a calling straight into the Army. It was a calling into God's ministry. And it wasn't until I found the Army that I found the puzzle piece shape that my calling best fit into. And so if you're out there and you're really struggling with, hey, I feel called to this crazy idea, this crazy thing, and not sure where it fits, trust God. It was a good 6-year process, 7-year process from the time I first felt God calling me into ministry that was non-traditional and that was working with youth and young adults and was equipping and empowering them. And it all sounded really great to me. And everything God would reveal to me, I was like, yes, I love this, but have no idea where this goes. And it was a good 7-year process before I found the space that my puzzle piece fit. Yeah. And being patient with God in that process is necessary. He taught me so much in that process of just trusting him, trusting him in the ups and downs, and trusting him when everything went well. And then when nothing went well, when I got the call that was good news and bad news, I can tell you, I wasn't really feeling like my puzzle piece found its spot yet. Right. Just trusting God even in that, finding the how your puzzle piece fits and finding what your puzzle piece is. That I think is probably the most important journey to go on, is not necessarily to try and find where you fit yet, but ask God, help reveal to me who I am and what you've called me to do. Instead of trying to shove it in a spot. I can remember when she's turning 9 at the end of this week, but when my daughter was really young, we had one of those puzzles where it was like the square hole and the triangle hole and the circle hole that the kids have to learn their shapes. And I can't tell you how many times she tried to fit the square piece through the round hole, right? And that was like her biggest frustration, is like, no, I want this to go here. And sometimes we do that. We're like, no, God, I want to go here. It makes the most sense. God, put me in this place, put me in this position, in this calling. This makes the most sense. But it's when I leaned into God and trusted him that things fell into place. And it's different. I'm not an officer. I'm not called to be an officer. It took a while for that process to even get accepted by those who were in leadership, right? That they kept seeing my square peg and tried to put me in the round hole. And it took a while for me to just convince, like, hey, no, I'm very solid in my calling, and it's not that. Trust that God's put me where I'm supposed to be. So for me, it's a couple of layers, but that sense of calling, that first time I heard it was, I'm not going to say audible, but it was, I was reading scripture And I just felt this overwhelming presence of God in the room, and I knew that I was supposed to do something about it, and I didn't know what. And it was moments like that for over a year before I felt the ultimate, like, it all came together and I realized God's calling me into full-time ministry. So just hang on, whatever you're dealing with, wherever you're at, seek God for who you are and what puzzle piece you are, and trust God to put you where He wants you, not where you think you fit.
Yeah. I think you gotta thank God for some no's. I know a lot of people, when we were younger, you get no. They wanted to go to a certain college, they got a no. They wanted a position, they got a no. But now God is planning, saying, no, not this. I want you to go here. So if you hear a no in some form or fashion, whether it's position or education or wherever you're wanting to go, and you hear a no, if you're relying and trusting on God, He's got a yes for you. It's going to be big, and it's going to fit into the right puzzle piece into that hole.
Amen.
So, yes, Joel, I hear you. Miss Judy.
Yes. Well, I think my calling spanned my entire lifetime, because of course, growing up, you would hear, when are you going into training, and when are you going to go and accept your, that's always the question. That's always, and I learned very early on never to audibly say the word never. Like, I would hear people say, I am never going into training, and a few years down the road, that's where they end up. So I learned never to say never. I'm like, yeah, that's not where God is leading me right now. And I believe at those times in my life, it wasn't where He was leading me then, because I wasn't ready for it. I wasn't ready to go into training, fresh out of high school or fresh out of college, because there were some things I had to experience in life first. My calling was forged through pain and through hurt. We experience a lot of hurt, physically, emotionally, a lot of hurt in our journey to accepting our calling, in my journey to accepting my calling. And I think 6 is the number. Joe, you said 6 years. It took you 6 years. There was a lesson that it took me 6 years to learn, literally. And that was from Psalm 46:10, because I was stubborn. I was hard-headed, because I was trying to do things like a lot of us do. We were trying to spin our own wheels and do things and work life the way we want to, and make things go the way we want to go, and end up in a mess. So literally, God had to sit me down and say, you will not move from this place until you learn that I am God. Be still and know that I am God. But God, I want to do this. And He kept on repeating, be still and know that I am God. And until you learn that, you are not going to leave this place. You are not going to move. You are not going to do anything until you learn that. So it wasn't until I learned that He allowed me to physically move. That's when we physically moved from the Eastern Territory to the South. And I'm like, okay, all right, God, I see you. And then, of course, you think that those questions will stop. But because nobody knows me here, nobody's going to ask me when I'm going to go into training. That's not how God works. So the question still persisted. And I'm like, what is it? Why do these people keep asking me? Why am I going to training? I'm good where I am. I'm fine. I was happy working for the Army. I was working at DHQ. I was happy. But in the back of my mind, in the back of my heart, there was just still this emptiness. There was still something that, like that puzzle piece that you said, there was something that was missing. My heart was not fueled. I was not fulfilled in what I was doing. And I remember being pregnant with our daughter.
Hey, Judy, we lost you, but we want to hear the story.
Yeah, I know.
Are y'all still here? Oh, okay.
We're here.
There we go. We're here.
All I heard was that you were pregnant with your daughter.
Okay, yes. So I was pregnant with my daughter, and that's when I physically got up from I remember calling my husband on the phone, and I said, I'm gonna start our paperwork. I'm gonna go start it. And he said, okay. because we knew that God was calling it. And like you, Joel, it wasn't something that was audible, but it was this overwhelming sense of purpose. Like, this is what you have to do. This is where I've been leading you. Now you are ready to take that next step. Now you are ready to start that mammoth pile of paperwork that we had to fill out to go into enter training and just be that. And something that I always had to remind myself was that we were not called to the training school. That's only the process that we had to go through to get to where we needed to be. So when I finally got up from my desk to go start, because I was in the youth department at the time, so I just had to walk a few steps to the DYS's office, to the candidate secretary, and say, what do I have to do to start our paperwork? And he looked up at me and said, "What? For who? You?" He almost fell out of his seat, but I said yes. And then literally, I still remember it to this day. It felt like something just fell off of my shoulders when I finally said yes. And even now, I'm still remembering it. And it's just like, okay, when you say that yes, there's such freedom in just saying that yes. God, I don't know where you're going to lead me. I don't know where I'm going. I don't know what the next step is, but I'm saying yes, and I'm letting you take reign and take full control, because you are the one that led us up to this point, and you are the one that has already gone before us. So I don't need to know the plan. I just need to know that you have my world in your hand. And that's the best yes I have ever said in my life, and we are having a blast and continuing to say yes.
Yeah, in Louisville South too.
Yeah.
I'm glad you said yes. As my core officer and pastor. Switching gears, I kind of want to do a shout out session before we wrap this up. Tell me one thing that's changed you in ministry, what you see now that you have a few seasons under your belt in ministry. How has that changed you? How do you see ministry maybe different in your role? And then give me a shout out of somebody that led you, whether they discipled you, to guide you along into ministry. And somebody that you've said a few names already. Somebody that sticks out for me, I had great parents who are my heroes. So that's kind of, and they were officers in ministry, and they had parents that were in ministry. And so I look up to them, and it's nice to have them to call and digest stuff with from time to time. And my mom keeps me, accountable in my daily devotions. And of course, the Heckrans, who are my in-laws, who are wonderful officers, retired officers now, looking up to them and getting guidance from them. But one person in my life was a Sunday school teacher. When I was in 5th, 6th grade, 4th, 6th grade. So that should tell you a little bit about him already. He was a Sunday school teacher for 4th, 5th, and 6th grade boys.
God bless him.
Like the holiest of holies, right? His name was Ed Laity. Maybe some of you have heard of him. He was an officer's child, but was called to development for the Salvation Army. Now does his own consulting. But he was my Sunday school teacher. He was a Sunday school teacher on Sundays. And for whatever reason, I don't know if he was asked and just felt bad, or they bugged him enough that he said yes to being a Sunday school teacher. What I remember about Ed during Sunday school, I didn't really realize it then as a young boy, but growing older, he taught us the Bible. We opened the Word of God. We didn't open materials, which is fine to assist people, but he opened, and we would read 2 verses at a time. He would stop us from time to time and explain stuff, tell us stories. He would ask us questions at the end, and he would ask questions about the text, right? What was the name of the worm in the story of Jonah, right? And we'd be like, wait, what?
Right.
And like, but that would help us to understand we need to pay attention what each little word says, right? And so we moved away from there. We went with my Sunday school teacher. Then I went to TYI, which is our territorial youth event, and Ed was our counselor. So it's the same somewhat group of boys, and Ed spoke into our lives in those formative years as teenagers, as young adults, and still does to this day. So thank God for Ed Leahy, an employee of the Salvation Army at a time, and now a consulting, loves the Army, is a soldier, and a Sunday school teacher, right? A non-officer, really, that affected my spiritual walk and my journey and helped me to see that calling that God had laid on my heart. So, anybody else want to go next? Volunteer?
Sure, I'll go.
Yes,
I've got two. One is in the Army, one is not. The one who's not, her name is Sharon Laufer. Her and her husband were our youth pastors for my wife and I growing up in the church that we grew up in. And they still have just maintained such good contact. Anytime we have anything, crisis, whatever, we can call Sharon and her husband David, and they will love us through whatever. In fact, she was just over here a couple of weekends ago and just checks in and visits, and just incredible. We've journeyed with them through many things, and they've journeyed with us through many things. And you need good community who come around you and just support you no matter what, and are there for you no matter what. And the Laufers have just been rocks for Cheryl and I, for sure. And then inside the Army, we had an experience early on. We had a really rough season, and Cheryl and I were really considering, like, man, maybe it's just not meant to be anymore. Like, maybe something shifted. And it was Dan and Sarah Nelson, Sarah in particular, at a conference in Orlando, that saw us in passing, spoke to us for probably 15 minutes. It wasn't even a long conversation, but just such an impact at a really pivotal time for us. She didn't know what was going on, but she just encouraged both of us to trust God and to lean into God and to trust that He would work it out. And sometimes you need those people who are not afraid to just give you those spiritual bumps in the right direction, right? The little touch points. And she and Dan were that for Cheryl and I. And honestly, like, had it not been for that brief little conversation, I don't know that we would even still be in the Army right now. And it was just a God ordained moment to just guide us back to where we needed to be, and to trust Him despite human interference and people who were not acting in His authority, and just trust Him that He was going to work it out. And He did, and He does, and He's faithful. So yeah, that would be my couple of shout outs there. But put people around you who can speak into your life, who you trust to speak into your life, that you don't put up facades for, that you don't perform for. Have people that you can call on your worst day and tell them everything, and they aren't going to judge you. You need those people. You need them.
Yeah. Yep. So I'll go. Like you, Jay, of course, my parents are my ultimate heroes. They were the epitome of everything for me. Like, even for my officership, they're they set the bar high for me, because they are the type of leaders that they still are, because they're still in ministry. Even though they're retired, they're still in ministry, still loving hard, and still reaching out, and still, anybody who comes into town, can we come and stay? And they're just those loving people. They wear their hearts on their sleeves, and I just hold them in such high esteem, of course. But growing up for me, there are these two people that just stand out to me. Their names are Ken and Judy Burton. They're from the Eastern Territory. Kenny is he's actually the Order of the Founder. He got that 10 years ago. But I remember being a kid, and I sang with the group called New Sounds for Christ for years and years and years. And Kenny would, so he worked in he worked in Connecticut, and then he would drive to Brooklyn, where I lived, which is about maybe an hour and a half drive, to drive another 45 minutes to take me to rehearsal. And he would do that every single week. And to a kid, that's like, okay, you're coming to pick me up, big deal. But years, looking back, like, this man sacrificed his time and gas and money to come and pick me up so I would feel a part of something, so that I would feel included in something that was bigger than me. And he did this for years. And I remember having to go on trips and then they would come pick me up and I would stay at their house. And even when we go up for any types of visits, we make sure that we go and we see them, because and when we started having kids, they would love on our kids and just, they're Uncle Kenny and Aunt Judy. So they're just two people that just stand out in my mind's eye as heroes for me, because they showed the love of Jesus. It was nothing that they had to do. It was nothing that they felt obligated to. They just did it because that's who they are and that's who God created them to be. And I just appreciate them so much.
Amen.
Yeah. I just after hearing you three talk, I just want to pray for these people that have influenced you all.
Go ahead, Mark.
It's kind of going on in my heart.
Yeah.
Go.
So God, right now, Lord, we lift up those that have played a key part in the calling and the ministry of those who have responded. Lord, I thank you, God, for their faithfulness. Lord, I thank you that they were a reflection of you. Lord, I thank you for the good seed that has fallen into the lives of these people, and how that seed has taken root and is growing and producing fruit. And I pray, God, that you would continue to bless and use them for your glory. In Jesus' name, amen.
Yes.
Amen.
Amen. Amen.
Yes, sir.
So I'm thinking of those. Sorry, can you repeat the question?
It's somebody that has affected your ministry or discipled you into ministry, that just kind of guided you along. I think you've said a few already.
Yeah, so I already mentioned Major Julio Da Silva, Major Zach Bell, Major Marion Platt. They were pretty instrumental. And then I've also got to mention a couple of the ladies. Is this Women's History Month right now, or was that just the day?
Women's International Day.
Yes, it is.
One day.
Right.
So let me shout out my girls who played a role.
Every day is Women's International Day, right?
What's that?
I said every day
Yep.
should be Women's International Day.
Yeah.
If you have daughters, yes, sir.
Right.
Every day.
So, number one, my sister, Captain Ruth Cancia. She is awesome. She has always kept it real. Yet every time, like, she would show up, like, she would give all that she had. And just seeing that, and her being the eldest of the 6 of my parents' kids, she's always just been like a second mom and a leader in our family. And so to be able to watch her minister and be part of her ministry, that was very crucial. Next would be Captain Brandon Mason. I remember when I was at camp as a camper, the guy was just so kind and caring. And then growing up, he became an officer, and then like he would just continually connect with me and communicate just honestly and in a way that would encourage me to follow God's lead. And then I remember my first official position in ministry, right? So my first like full-time position in ministry, I was out in Memphis, Tennessee, working at the Croc. And I've got to work with the Howells, Captains John and Anita Howell. And when you talk about cool, when you think cool, like Captain Jonathan is definitely like pictured when you see the word cool in the dictionary, because the man is just cool. And so like being part of his ministry and being under his ministry was just it was mind blowing.
Did he pay you to say that?
No, he didn't. He didn't. But yeah, and then like being able to work with Captain Anita, like the lady is just so passionate and just thinks so out of the box and creatively, and just presents, just excellence when doing like, programming or speaking or whatever. And so those people definitely had a huge impact and made ministry fun and made it attractive, and made me just want to be part of it, and just kept it real all the time. You know what I mean? Like, it was just like, oh yeah, it didn't seem like it was something that was this high and I had to jump to achieve or experience, but it was just there and awesome.
Yeah, they're good people. Anita keeps me straight too, she's a fellow candidate secretary. So I'm like, Anita, what am I supposed to be doing? She talks it through with me, so I always lean on her. Jonathan, cool, I guess you could say that. So, but I love Jonathan Howe. Another guy that my accountability partner that I talk to all the time, so he keeps me straight as well. So I give thanks for that. I did want to just end. I think I've been saying we're going to end this, but I did want to end on just, if anybody's watching, anybody listening, trying to figure out calling in their life, we do want to connect. You can connect with your core officer, probably the go-to person that knows you best. If not, you can connect with the four of us on this screen, or myself. You can connect with us through Facebook Messenger or through this website, Career and Calling and KT. Just reach out, and we'd love to talk to you about ministry, full-time ministry, part-time ministry, employment, officership, just to discuss that and see what that means in your life and how we can help you be guided by that. Like Joel speaking on what Booth said, haven't heard, you're not called, you say, I say you haven't heard that call. Everybody is called to something, whether it's a regular employment in the secular world, but you're called to a ministry, whether being a Sunday school teacher, all the way up to being called to be an officer and everything in between for all of us. Reach out to people, connect with people. If it's me, if it's Lieutenant Cancia or Lieutenant Judy or Joel, any one of us would love to talk to you and guide you and direct you in that. So would love to talk to you about that. I was going to end with one question, and what's one mistake? Just so we can see that we are not perfect. Sometimes people leading ministry are seen as higher than everybody else. We're not. We make plenty of mistakes. I made plenty of mistakes just in this last weekend. I feel like I'm not doing this job right, but I know God has brought me here for whatever reason. And so just to understand that we all make mistakes. You read through the Bible, everyone he calls are all sinners and probably the worst of the worst, but he will use us and lead us in that direction. So if anybody feels led to share a mistake, I shared mine with the story of the child who became a spiritual leader, right, in Florida, despite my mistake, or something you may have learned as an officer. You necessarily don't have to share a mistake. I'm kind of making you call yourself out, but something you've learned, maybe something you used to do wrong, but now do it right.
There's so many, you can't pinpoint one.
Maybe just the understanding that we're all going to mess up at some point.
Yeah.
But if where God calls us in those mistakes, we learn great lessons, like I did with my mistake. That one big one that kind of haunts me till this day. But I know God is using me to get a message to my heart and say, don't give up on kids. Don't
Yeah.
box in kids or young people into a certain place
Yeah.
that you think they're going to go, because God can do a mighty thing with them. So I think we're going to wrap it up. Any questions from the peanut gallery in the comments? I see Heather Dolby. That's an awesome woman of God right there.
She
Mhm.
is.
Yeah.
Indeed.
This is the quietest I've ever seen Ethan Purcell.
Is my man's on here?
He's on here.
That guy. So that guy right there. He's awesome.
Oh, great.
Let me first say that. And then second,
Couldn't have said anything.
I always
This
share
was
this
going
story.
so well.
Hey, you did it, Jay.
My fault.
So Ethan Purcell, I remember I was working at summer camp and I walked up to him one day and we just started talking. And while I was talking to him, I realized how brilliant he is. And I was like, and that was right when I was trying to figure out, is ministry for me? Do I want to do this? And so I asked him, I was like, Major Ethan, can I work with you? Can you hire me to do something within the ministry? And he said, no. He told me no. He said no, he wouldn't hire me. And
Probably the best no you've ever heard.
Right. So after that, like 5 years later, I get appointed to Nashville, and so I get to work with him. And I walk up
That's
to him,
funny.
and I'm like, Ethan, I remember 5 years ago I asked you if I could work with you, and you told me no. And now I get to work with you, and I'm going to learn from you. So that was kind of cool.
That's
Gotcha.
funny.
Yeah. Excellent. Well, thank you guys for getting involved in this first summit. I hope to have a few more in the days ahead and get a group of you guys and just talk about ministry and calling and just how we can all fit into the Salvation Army and the calling that we have there.
Yeah.
So again, thank you guys. Just amazed that I get to work with people like yourselves who are just excited about ministry and doing the most good, as they say in the Army world, around the Paradise Division. So I'm going to shut it off. Thank you guys for joining us if you're watching. And it's daylight savings, so it feels like it's bedtime, but it's only 7:15. So, well, thank you guys.
Thank you,
God
Jay.
bless you all in your ministry. Again, if you're watching and feel called or not sure if you're called, know that you are called to something. We'd like to help you and guide you and direct you in that. All right. God bless you. Thank you, Mark, Joel, Judy. Love you
God
guys.
bless you. Love you.
Thank
God bless you.
Bye, guys.
Thanks for having us on.
Yes, sir.
Okay.